I feel safe enough to give feedback, to share criticism, to innovate, to have ideas, to share ideas, to tell you what I think. It's about the world that we live in and how we want to work, how we want to live, actually. In the end, if we can't understand people, how can we ever expect to drive their performance?
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Shift. It's a series where we sit with industry experts to deliberate key issues that change the world around us. And today we have with us Mimi Nicklin, who's an international best-selling author and an executive coach. Mimi, welcome to ETH Insights.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So few leaders have managed to navigate the complexities of leading teams where 4 generations have been involved.
True.
To start off, what really sparked your interest when it comes to multi-generational leadership?
You know, as you said, for the first time in history, we have 4 generations in one place. And when you think about perhaps somebody at the top, maybe in their 60s, 70s, 80s, sometimes 90s, and then people coming in at the bottom, these guys don't even speak the same language, let alone work in the same way. So I think the reality is that is a reflection of our world at large. And if we can't make it work inside our organizations, it's going to impact, the whole of the world around us. So there hasn't been a time in history, actually, when it's been this complicated. So we've got our work cut out for us, but the time is now, I think, to fix it.
Right. Mimi, we hear a lot about how leadership has changed over the last few years. Tell us, in what way has it changed? How do we approach it? How do we need to lead teams today as compared to, say, a decade ago?
It's changed so much in that decade. It's actually even changed in half a decade because of the pandemic and the impact that had on the world around us. So for many decades, leadership was about power and systems and structures. Today, especially as the younger generation come through, but this is not all about Gen Z. This is just about humanity. It's about the world that we live in and how we want to work, how we want to live, actually. And there are many leaders that find that very uncomfortable for very fair reasons, because change is uncomfortable. Today in the workplace, people want to belong. People want to know that they have an identity and a value beyond their title or their role. We know that when people feel that they're understood in the workplace, we see engagement go up by 68%. We see profits go up by up to 23%. So this shift in leadership is not just about a sign of our times. It's about the bottom line and how we build our future.
Right. Interesting. Now, you spoke about Gen Z, right? We have Gen Z coming in, we have Gen Alpha coming in. Do you think their needs are often misunderstood when it comes to traditional leadership?
Yes, I think so, because I think the leaders aren't listening very well. I teach a lot of what I call listening-led leadership, which is fundamentally how to listen better. Because we tell people to listen, but we don't teach them very often. When we don't have understanding between us, we create distance. So when empathy, the ability to understand each other, not be kind, not be nice, not be sympathetic, but simply understand. When that understanding is low, when I don't understand that young generation, it's very easy to fill that gap with assumption, with judgment, with opinion, based on your own experience, but not based on the reality of the people that you're trying to understand. So that ability to understand those generations is really critical. So to answer your question, are they misunderstood? Absolutely. But is it within our power to fill that? Absolutely.
Right. You've beautifully developed this really powerful framework called the ALUR. Can you walk us through the kind of leadership it stands for?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for asking me that. So the ALUR framework is a framework to teach listening within leadership, to enable them to dial in to performance. In the end, if we can't understand people, how can we ever expect to drive their performance? How can we ever expect to include them? Gen Z, women, whoever it is that we're trying to bring into the workforce with us. So the ALUR framework is a framework that I developed to help people really understand how to do that. And it stands for, the A is for authenticity, for presence as a leader. Presence is not power. Presence is far deeper than that. Just being the boss is not enough to create connection. So the A is for authenticity. The L is for listening, which is an active skill set, because empathy sits in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. This is not a soft skill. This is a hard skill. The U is for understanding. Data, human data, to decode your workforce or your clients, to drive loyalty, to drive more sales. And then the R is recognition. The ability to recognize people for what they're trying to bring to the table, their opinion, their value, their seniority perhaps, and to really ensure that people feel valued in the workplace. That perception shift alone will improve efficiencies by up to 33%.
Great. It's quite interesting.
Did I convince you?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Right. So let me just pivot this conversation to something that you're really passionate about, and that is psychological safety. It's a term that we've, heard a lot about of late. Can you simplify it for us?
Yes, so psychological safety is simply the feeling of safety in the workplace. What that means is I feel safe enough to give feedback, to share criticism, to innovate, to have ideas, to share ideas, to tell you what I think. If I don't feel safe, if I think Jagjeet's going to judge me, you're going to laugh at me, you're going to tell me you're too junior to have that idea, I'm not going to share. There is low psychological safety.
True.
Right? So psychological safety is a new term, as you said, simply to describe the reality that people feel comfortable enough to bring their full capacity, their full potential, their full performance into the workplace by being able to speak up, give feedback, and innovate.
Right. Now, given that we have established the significance of psychological safety, why do you think leaders today shy away from it? Is it just a case of being nice, or is there a lot, deeper?
Okay, I think the reality is that most leaders don't know what these things are. They're new terms, they're new realities. The psychology behind them is ancient. Our ancestors knew this, but the terminology is new. And I think that the reality is that being a leader today is harder than at any other time in history. So if you think even back to maybe 10 years ago, if you summarized, a leader would have probably 4 key areas to look after. They would have their board of directors, their stakeholders, their team, their team and their culture, their customers, and of course their bottom line. Today, and we touched on this at the beginning, right, the world that's changing, on top of all of that, they must now have programs for well-being and mental health and diversity and inclusion and maternity leave and paternity leave and political instability and social change and occasionally war, right? There is a lot going on out there.
Right.
But we're only human. So in Q1 of this year, 2025, we saw the highest number in history of Fortune 500 CEO resignations, 233. What that tells me is it's just too much. So when I now tell a leader, hey, could you please develop a program for psychological safety? They're like, come on. More? I'm already doing all of this. So I think a big part of that is simply having the right team in place. Understanding the data, that this is about business growth. This is never about being nice. Please be nice, but it's not about being nice, right? This is about profit. This is about performance. This is about sustainably stopping attrition, people resigning. And we know that it also drives up customer loyalty.
No.
So we need to give leaders the data, and then we need to help them create these systems, because otherwise it just becomes another thing on the list.
Right. Now, your first book, Softening the Edge, really resonated with the business world. Your latest is Empathy at Work.
Yes.
What inspired you to write this one? And more importantly, how does it build on what you've shared already?
Yes. So Empathy at Work was written for India, actually. So I have been in and out and around India. I've been in Asia my whole career. And I wanted to create something that actually resonated with this country's leadership and future and the people that are here today. I believe that the more the world talks about empathy, the more empathy the world will have. And the world, India, has never needed more of it than now. We need to reconnect our people. We are suffering with a loneliness deficit all around the world. So 52% of our people are lonely. And according to data, chronic loneliness is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Right.
Our loneliness is killing us. Starting in the workplace is a critical place to start. We spend up to 90,000 hours of our life at work, 5/7 of the week.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we can create change in the workplace, we can create change in the world. So I want to help reconnect the world. I have a vision to reconnect 1 million people by 2028. That doesn't seem like a big number here in India. But beyond that, our people are suffering. Someone told me earlier today that in India, there are 5 suicides a week due to work-related stress.
Right.
And I believe we need to take action to shift that and turn it around.
Right. Absolutely. Agree with that. Now, over the course of this conversation, Mimi, you've beautifully tied elements like empathy, psychological safety, multi-generational leadership. Now, how does this combination shape the future of work?
I think it shapes the future of work because we've got a new understanding, or maybe a renewed understanding, of the role of humanity within a capitalist system. So the work that I talk about is to balance humanism with capitalism. We all want to make money, we all want to grow, and so we should. Our economies need us to. But we need to do that in a way that sustains the human race. Empathy is a pro-social skill set. It means that it will keep the human race alive. It will reconnect us in our ability to thrive as human beings. And I think that today there is an understanding of that. When I think about my own work, just 4 years ago, nobody was inviting me to this interview to have this conversation.
Okay.
It just wasn't on the table.
Right.
Today, I get to travel the world every week and have conversations with people like you because leadership is shifting, because the world needs to reconnect, and because 79% of our global workforce is disengaged. We can't function with 79% of our workforce as being disengaged, right? So I think there is a bottom line requirement, and there is also a social awareness that is changing the way that we see our businesses as part of the structures that lead us as a human race.
Looking into the next decade that is to come, what leadership trait do you think will make the real difference?
Can I say empathy? Is that cheating?
It's not. Because it's the need of the hour, if I may say that.
Need of the hour, it is. No, it absolutely is. I mean, I wouldn't do this work if I didn't believe that. If I didn't believe that when you look forward to the leadership of tomorrow, the ability to understand your people, again, that's what empathy is. It's a skill set that helps you take the perspective of someone else. Not be nice to them, not be kind to them. Those are wonderful things, but we can't always run a business with those. This skill set is a skill set that will change how we're able to work together, how we collaborate, our efficiency, our innovation. So I believe that the future of leadership is in listening-led leadership. It is in the ability for larger organizations, populations of our world, to reconnect over our common humanity, but for a cause for growth for all of us. Prosperity will come from shared humanity.
Right. For someone who's written at length about leadership, what is the best leadership advice you've received?
I think probably when I think back to probably about 10 years ago, somebody told me this, maybe more, that the most power you have in a room is to say nothing at all. And I remember when I was younger thinking, how is that possible? How is it possible that power comes from saying nothing? Because the media will tell us that we must speak up and shout louder. But as I went through this career journey of mine, I realized the power of that actually true leadership comes from being able to listen to others, and that simply speaking more doesn't create more progress. And sometimes really understanding the power of a pause, of listening to others,
Right.
is where leadership really sits. So I think the best of the leadership advice I got was that be comfortable with silence, and when you do speak in a way that others want to follow.
Be comfortable with silence. That's a wonderful
Comfortable
motto.
with silence.
And on Mimi, this has been super fun. It has been super insightful and a real pleasure to be a part of.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you for tuning in. For more such videos, follow us on ET Edge Insights.